Sergeant Marcus Thorne led his elite K-9 unit through the swirling river of dawn commuters in Grand Central. 12 Belgian Malinois moved in flawlessly disciplined formation, a mobile, breathing bulwark of training and instinct. In less than an hour, their predictable ritual would shatter, and an event would unfold that would be etched into memory of the city forever. Marcus adjusted the strap of his duty belt. He felt a familiar surge of pride watching his team. These animals were more than dogs. They were precision instruments, each a specialist in detecting explosives, narcotics, and human threat. Together, they were a mobile, breathing bulwark of training, instinct, and loyalty. As they advanced, Marcus's own partner, a sleek and intense Malinois named Rex, stayed a purposeful half-step ahead. His intelligent, dark eyes continuously scanned the crowd, his wet nose testing the complex air for the faintest trace of danger. Commuters often paused, some smiling, others snapping pictures with their phones. Marcus understood. The dogs were a visible, comforting promise of safety. He allowed the attention, knowing it fostered a crucial sense of public trust. Just then, his radio earpiece crackled to life. Unit Alpha maintained sweep pattern in main concourse. Keep formation tight. VIP movement in 20. Copy, command. Alpha unit proceeding. Marcus responded, his voice a calm, low baritone. He had done this 100 times. Yet Rex's ears twitched. His head cocked, gaze intensifying, locking onto a dimly lit seating area near the iconic gold clock. Marcus followed his line of sight. Nothing seemed out of place. Just a cleaner with a cart, weary travelers slumped on benches, and a small family huddled by an information pillar. But a faint, inexplicable prickle of unease traced a cold finger down his spine. He pushed the feeling aside and gave a low, sharp click of his tongue. Rex immediately straightened, refocusing, his body once again the picture of obedient readiness. The unit continued its patrol, a moving wall of silent authority. None of them, not even Marcus with all his years on the force, could have guessed that before the day was over, these impeccably trained dogs would defy every command, surround one small child, and alter the course of countless lives. The morning rush swelled. The scent of coffee, pretzels, and disinfectant hung thick in the air. The rhythmic flipping of destination boards and the distant rumble of a train arriving on a lower level provided a constant, percussive backdrop. But amidst all this chaotic motion near the gold clock, something small and profoundly still stood out. A little girl, who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, stood completely alone next to an abandoned luggage cart. She wasn't crying or calling out. In her arms, she clutched a faded, well-loved teddy bear, holding it so tightly that her tiny knuckles were white. A small, clean bandage on her elbow stood out against her pale skin. Sergeant Marcus Thorne noticed her almost by accident. His unit had just finished clearing the nearby Vanderbilt Hall when a flash of bright red, her little woolen coat, caught his eye. Lost children usually cried or searched faces with wide, terrified eyes. This girl's quiet calm was unnerving. Marcus exchanged a glance with one of his junior officers, Jessup. "You see anyone with her?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Jessup shook his head. "Negative, Sarge. No one's approached her since we came through." It was then that Rex slowed his pace. The lead Malinois' head turned deliberately toward the girl, his body shifting from patrol stance to one of deep, focused caution. One by one, as if connected by an invisible thread, the other 11 dogs began to mirror his behavior, their noses lifted in unison. Sampling the air, their collective attention narrowing onto the solitary child with the teddy bear. A few commuters started to take notice. Some pointed, thinking it a charming scene, a lost kid about to be rescued by the heroic K-9 unit. But the feeling in the air wasn't charming. It felt heavy, charged with a tension that was beginning to raise the hairs on Marcus's arms. He moved forward slowly, crouching down to her level to appear less threatening. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "Are you lost? Do you know where your mommy is?" The girl didn't answer. She just hugged her teddy bear tighter and looked up at him with enormous, sapphire blue eyes that seemed hollow, as if she was staring right through him. "Can you tell me your name?" Marcus tried again, his smile warm but forced. Silence. Only the faint sound of the bear's plastic eye clicking against a button as her tiny fingers trembled. Behind him, the dogs grew more agitated. Rex let out a low, rumbling growl, a sound of clear, unequivocal warning. Marcus turned, his brow furrowed in confusion. His instincts, sharpened over 18 years on the force, were screaming that something was profoundly, dangerously wrong. And judging by the synchronized tension now coursing through 12 trained police dogs, he wasn't the only one who felt it. In that bustling, historic corner of Grand Central Terminal, the fragile calm was about to shatter. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The low growl from Rex seemed to hang in the air for a moment, a solitary note of warning in the terminal's cavernous hum. Then, as if a silent switch had been flipped, everything exploded into motion. Rex's growl erupted into a sharp, commanding bark that ricocheted off the marble walls and the star-filled ceiling. The sound was a trigger. In perfect, terrifying unison, all 12 Belgian Malinois turned their heads as one, their focus laser-locking on the little girl in the red coat. Their disciplined formation broke, not into chaos, but into a new, purposeful pattern. They moved with startling speed, forming a wide, deliberate circle around her. The only sound was a synchronized click-clack of 48 claws on marble as they settled into their defensive ring. The coordinated movement was so sudden and so precise that it seemed to suck the sound right out of the concourse. This was not in the training manual, Marcus thought, his mind racing even as his muscle memory took over. Conversations died mid-sentence. A man froze with a dollar bill halfway into a musician's open case. A tour guide's amplified spiel cut off abruptly. Every single person in the vicinity stopped, their eyes widening as they tried to process the surreal scene. A tiny, silent child surrounded by a ring of powerful, taut police dogs. Hold positions. Marcus's voice boomed, cutting through the stunned silence. It was a command drilled into the dogs and handlers 1,000 times. But for the first time in his career, it was utterly ignored. The dogs didn't look at him. Their entire world had narrowed to the girl and the space around her. They weren't barking anymore. Instead, they stood their ground, bodies coiled like springs, heads low, and tails held straight and stiff. A silent curl of the lip, revealing a glint of white teeth, showed their clear warning. They weren't facing the girl. They were facing out, their collective gaze scanning the crowd beyond their circle. They weren't restraining her. They were protecting her. A wave of panic, silent at first, then bubbling into frantic whispers, swept through the bystanders. People stumbled back, grabbing their children and pulling them close. A forest of phone screens lit up, recording the unbelievable event. Security officers who had been monitoring the K-9 unit's progress now rushed forward, their hands instinctively moving toward their equipment. "Stand down," Marcus shouted, his palm raised toward the advancing security team. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his training held. He knew these dogs. He had raised Rex from a puppy. He trusted them with his life. If they were defying a direct command, if they were acting as one like this, there was a reason, a profound, undeniable reason. "Easy, team. Easy now," he murmured, his voice dropping to a calm, steady tone as he took a cautious step toward Rex. The lead Malinois' gaze was darting between the girl and something, or someone in the crowd, his nostrils flaring as he sampled the air. Every muscle in the dog's body was vibrating with restrained energy, a live wire of pure instinct. The other dogs mirrored his intensity, their low, harmonized growls creating a chilling chorus that seemed to make the very air vibrate. The little girl, impossibly, still hadn't cried out. She stood inside her circle of canine guardians, her small frame dwarfed by them. She looked from one dog to another, her sapphire blue eyes wide with confusion, but not with the raw terror one would expect. She just clutched her teddy bear, her tiny fingers working against its matted fur. The morning light from the window streamed down, highlighting the contrast between the glistening, powerful coats of the dogs and the small, bright red of her jacket. A stark portrait of immense power and fragile innocence colliding. "What's going on, Sarge?" Officer Jessup whispered, his face pale. "I've never seen anything like this. Not even in training." "I don't know," Marcus replied, his eyes constantly scanning the perimeter, looking for whatever threat the dogs had sensed. But do not break their circle. Let them work. Trust them. The crowd's whispers grew louder, more frantic. Is she dangerous? A woman hissed, clutching her purse. What could a child possibly have? Another man asked, his voice trembling. Look at them. They're not hurting her. They're guarding her. Then Rex barked again, a short, urgent, staccato sound. On cue, the circle of dogs adjusted their stance almost imperceptibly, tightening their formation, closing the gaps between them. The message was now crystal clear. This was a shield, a living, breathing barricade. Marcus's pulse thrummed in his ears. He could read Rex like no one else, and what he saw in his partner's posture wasn't aggression. It was a fierce, primal duty mixed with a layer of fear. Rex wasn't reacting to the girl. He was reacting for her. Something near her or on her had triggered their deepest protective instincts. Something human senses had missed entirely. Marcus crouched slightly, his hand hovering near his utility belt, his eyes sweeping the surrounding faces. Frightened commuters, confused security, a cleaner paused with his cart. Nothing seemed overtly out of place, but the dogs knew better. The echoing barks had settled into a tense silence, broken only by the muffled PA system and the ragged breathing of the onlookers. Then, without any further warning, Rex's ears shot straight up. His head turned with laser focused toward the little girl's teddy bear. A deep, rumbling growl grew in his chest, lower and more menacing than before. It was a sound Marcus had only heard a handful of times in his career, a sound that promised imminent danger. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Whatever had drawn his dog's unwavering attention, it was connected to that worn-out toy. And in that single, heart-stopping instant, the normal morning at Grand Central Terminal officially dissolved into chaos. At Bonds Unspoken, we believe every story between a human and their animal companion deserves to be heard. If you agree, please like, share, and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you can join us every time another Bond speaks louder than words. The tension in the air snapped like a frayed wire. The moment Rex lunged, not at the girl, but directly toward the teddy bear in her arms, the concourse erupted into pure, unadulterated chaos. The concourse erupted. A collective scream tore through the air as a tower of souvenirs crashed and a coffee cart overturned, sending a river of dark liquid and shattered ceramic through the panicked stampede. The sharp, bitter smell of spilled coffee mixed with the sour scent of human fear, creating a nauseating cocktail in the air. The previously orderly scene transformed into a panicked stampede as terminal security officers fought to contain the situation, their shouts lost in the din. The sound was overwhelming, a fierce, rhythmic barking from 12 dogs that echoed off every hard surface, mixed with the screams of terrified commuters and the sudden, blaring shriek of the terminal's emergency alarm. The alarm wasn't just loud. It was a physical pressure, vibrating in Marcus's chest and making his teeth ache. Overhead, red emergency lights began to flash, casting the majestic concourse in a pulsing, urgent glow. Everyone stay back. Get back, Marcus yelled, his voice a raw command that was swallowed by the noise. Some passengers, seeing the dog's intensity, were convinced the little girl was about to be attacked. Others, their minds jumping to the worst-case scenario, pointed and shouted, "Bomb!" The word rippled through the crowd, amplifying the panic tenfold. In the eye of this hurricane, the little girl remained frozen, a statue of fear. Her blue eyes, wide and unblinking, darted from the barking dogs to screaming faces around her. A single tear traced a path down her pale cheek, but she made no sound. Rex had positioned his body squarely between her and the surging crowd, a living, breathing shield. The other 11 dogs mirrored him perfectly, their circle now a defensive ring, their heads turned outward, growling at anyone who came too close. They were no longer just protecting her from an unseen threat. They were protecting her from the panic they had inadvertently caused. Marcus's instincts, honed by years of experience, were screaming at him that this wasn't a loss of control. This was the opposite. Every movement, every synchronized growl, every twitch of their ears was deliberate. They were working as a team, executing a protocol that bypassed their training and tapped into something deeper, more primal. "Rex," he called out firmly, locking eyes with his partner. "What is it, boy? What do you smell?" Rex didn't even blink. He pressed close to the girl, his nose twitching frantically near the teddy bear once more, and let out a deep warning bark that seemed to vibrate through the floor. It was a sound of pure urgency. Marcus's blood ran cold. He keyed his radio, his voice tight and clipped. "Command, this is Unit Alpha in main concourse, near the gold clock. We have AK-9 alert on a child's possession. I am declaring a code black. Repeat, code black. I need bomb squad on standby and a full terminal evacuation of my immediate vicinity. Seal off the main concourse immediately." The response was instantaneous. "Copy that, Unit Alpha. Code black acknowledged. ETA on bomb squad is 5 minutes. Security is mobilizing for evacuation." All around them, security teams rushed to block the entrances to concourse, herding the frantic stream of people toward emergency exits. The scene was one of utter confusion and fear. Flashing lights, shouted orders, and the relentless, echoing bark of the dogs. The ordinary morning had been utterly obliterated. Amidst the storm, Marcus forced himself to crouch down near the girl again, speaking in the softest, calmest tone he could muster, despite the adrenaline screaming through his veins. "Hey, sweetheart. It's okay. You're safe. These dogs are here to help you. You're doing great. Just stay right there with them." The child blinked, her small voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the noise and hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. "They're not mad," she trembled, her eyes fixed on Rex. "They're scared." Her words resonated deep within him. He turned to look at Rex, who stood rigid, his tail straight out, his gaze locked on the teddy bear with an unnerving intensity. Marcus's got twisted into a knot. His K-9 partner wasn't scared. He was issuing a warning. But the girl was right. Beneath the fierce professionalism, there was an edge of canine fear, the instinctual reaction to a clear and present danger. Whatever Rex was sensing, it wasn't just a theoretical threat. It was imminent. And as Marcus's eyes followed the dog's unwavering focus to the silent, worn-out toy, a terrifying realization dawned on him. Somewhere inside that innocent-looking bear, hidden beneath soft fur and childhood memories, was the reason his entire unit had gone on high alert. It was the reason the terminal was being evacuated, and it was the reason everyone in the vicinity was holding their breath, waiting for a single, catastrophic moment that could end it all. The air inside the sealed-off main concourse was thick and heavy, charged with a paralyzing mixture of fear and anticipation. The initial wave of panic screams had subsided, replaced by an eerie, strange silence broken only by the relentless, low growls of the K-9 unit and the distant, muffled sounds of the ongoing evacuation beyond the security cordon. Red emergency lights continued to wash over the scene in rhythmic pulses, painting the faces of the remaining officers in shades of crimson and shadow, making the entire situation feel like a paused scene from a high-stakes thriller. Marcus Thorne stood his ground, his entire being focused on the tiny girl and the dog that was his partner. The world had narrowed to this few square feet of polished marble floor. He took a slow, deliberate knee, keeping his movements fluid and non-threatening. The last thing he needed was to spook the child or the dogs any further. Rex remained at his side, a statue of tension, his eyes fixed on the teddy bear as it were a venomous snake poised to strike. The other dogs maintained their protective circle, a formidable barrier between the girl and the rest of the world. Their training was now secondary to the deeper, more ancient instinct to guard the vulnerable. "Sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice soft but firm, needing to be heard over the ambient alarm and the dog's warnings. "I need you to hand me your toy." He saw the immediate flash of resistance in her wide, sapphire blue eyes. She hugged the bear closer, her small body trembling violently. "It's my friend," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The simple declaration was laden with a child's pure love and dependency. "His name is Barnaby. Daddy gave him to me." Those words, "Daddy gave him to me," hit Marcus with a fresh wave of urgency and dread. This wasn't just a toy. It was a tangible link to a parent, a cherished possession. Taking it from her felt cruel, but the cold, logical part of his brain, the part trained for threats, knew it was essential. "I promise you, I will give Barnaby right back," Marcus said, pouring as much sincerity into his voice as he possibly could. He held out his gloved hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. The girl, Chloe. He realized he still didn't know her name, looked from his face to Rex's intense stare, and then down at the worn fur of the bear. A silent internal battle played out on her features. Finally, with a heart-wrenching sniffle, she slowly, reluctantly, extended the toy towards him. Marcus took it with the utmost care, his thick gloves making the action slightly clumsy. The moment the stuffed animal left her grasp, the little girl wrapped her arms around herself, looking suddenly smaller and more lost than ever. The toy felt ordinary at first, the soft, matted fur familiar to the touch. But as his fingers closed around the bear's torso, they registered a dense, cold weight sewn deep within its center. It wasn't the chill of the air conditioning. It was a dense, metallic coldness that seemed to seep to the fabric and into his very bones. It felt hidden, purposeful. "Jessup," Marcus called out, his voice low but cutting clearly through the tense atmosphere. "Get the portable scanner over here. Now!" Officer Jessup, who was standing a few feet away, moved with swift efficiency, unclipping a compact, handheld device from his kit. It was a sophisticated piece of gear capable of detecting a range of metallic and chemical signatures. The soft whirring sound it made as it powered up seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet space. Marcus held the bear steady while Jessup slowly passed the scanner over its body. The device's screen remained a calm, steady green for a second that felt like an hour. Then it lit up with a frantic orange glow, and a sharp, high-frequency beep-beep-beep sliced to the terminal's background noise. Everyone in the immediate vicinity froze. The barking of the dogs intensified, becoming more sharp and urgent. They sensed the confirmation, the validation of their fears. "What is it?" Marcus asked, his throat suddenly tight, making it difficult to speak. Jessup looked down at the reading on the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and growing alarm. "Strong metal signature," he reported, his voice hushed, coming from inside the torso. It's dense." A cold knot tightened in Marcus's stomach. Rex let out another low, guttural growl, taking a single step back, the fur along his spine bristling. The other dogs responded in a chorus of synchronized barks, their circle tightening instinctively around the girl once more, their bodies vibrating with a renewed sense of vigilance. Marcus turned his gaze back to the child, his heart aching for her. "Do you know what's inside Barnaby, honey? Did you put anything in there?" The girl shook her head vigorously, fresh tears welling in her eyes and spilling over. "No, it's just a bear. It's just Barnaby. He has a jingly ball in his tummy, that's all." Her voice was a desperate plea for him to believe her. The scanner beeped again, even louder and more insistent this time. Jessup's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he adjusted the device's settings. "Marcus, sir, this isn't a jingly ball. The signature is all wrong. There's wiring in here. I'm reading a distinct configuration of conductive materials." The words landed not like a pebble, but like a crack of thunder. Wiring. The word transformed the situation entirely. This was no longer just a suspicious object. It was a potential incendiary or explosive device. The air seemed to be sucked out of the entire concourse. "Everyone back off," Marcus commanded, his voice rising to a boom that brooked no argument. "Carefully. Now!" Officers and handlers ushered each other back, creating a wider perimeter. Marcus, moving with painstaking slowness, placed the stuffed bear gently on the floor, as if it were made of glass. It lay there, a seemingly innocent child's toy against the cold, hard marble, now the most dangerous object in the entire terminal. The bomb squad was on its way, but every second stretched into a terrifying eternity. Rex stood guard over it, his body stiff, his eyes locked on the toy with an unblinking intensity, as if expecting it to move or come to life at any moment. Jessup's radio crackled to life. "EOD is on site, Unit Alpha. They are suiting up. ETA to your position, 2 minutes. Marcus nodded tightly, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the little girl. She was crying softly now, her small shoulders shaking. And then her small, broken voice pierced the heavy silence once more. "I told him not to put it in there." The sentence hung in the air, chilling and profound. Marcus felt a jolt of electricity shoot straight down his spine. He slowly turned to face her fully. "Told who, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Who did you tell not to put in there?" She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. The nice man at the terminal. He said Daddy sent him to fix Barnaby, that his stitching was coming loose." A chill, colder than the metallic core inside the toy, shot through Marcus's chest. The pieces of a horrifying puzzle were snapping together with devastating clarity. Whoever had tampered with this bear hadn't just been hiding something. They had used this child, her innocence, and her love for a gift from her father as the perfect, unsuspicious cover. The real question now wasn't just what was inside the toy. It was who had given it to her and what their endgame truly was. The terminal had fallen into an uneasy, watchful silence, a stark contrast to the chaos of just minutes before. The only movements were the deliberate, practiced actions of the bomb disposal technicians, clad in their bulky, intimidating suits, as they surrounded the teddy bear that lay innocently on the cold marble floor. The EOD team worked with silent, grim efficiency, their every movement calculated and precise. Bright inspection lights had been set up, casting a harsh, clinical glow on the toy, transforming it from an object of comfort into a subject of a terrifying forensic examination. Marcus stood with the sobbing mother and Chloe a safe distance away, his hand resting reassuringly on Rex's head, feeling the constant, low-frequency growl still rumbling in the dog's chest. The Malinois' focus was split between the technicians and the massive archways that led to the terminal's exits, his instincts still screaming that the situation was far from resolved. The woman, who had identified herself as Sarah, held her daughter, Chloe, in a bone-crushing hug, her body trembling. She kept whispering soothing nothings into Chloe's hair, more to calm herself than the child. Marcus watched them, his posture shifting slightly to place himself more squarely between them and the dissected toy. One of the bomb technicians, his face visible through the clear visor of his helmet, carefully used a set of long, specialized tools to make a minute incision along a seam on the bear's back. The sound of the fabric tearing was subtle, but in the tense silence, it was as loud as a gunshot. Chloe whimpered and buried her face deeper into her mother's neck. With painstaking slowness, the technician parted the fake fur and stuffing, revealing a hidden cavity within the toy's torso. Nestled inside, connected by a web of hair-thin, colorful wires, was a metallic core no bigger than a large coin. It was sleek, professional, and utterly out of place in a child's plush toy. The lead technician, a woman named Dr. Abrams who Marcus had worked with once before, straightened up and pulled her helmet off, her expression not relief, but of deep confusion. She looked toward Marcus, her brow furrowed. "It's not an explosive," Abrams stated, her voice cutting clearly through the static-filled silence. "There's no primary charge, no detonator. Nothing that could cause a physical blast." A collective, shuddering sigh of relief passed through the assembled officers. Marcus felt his own shoulders drop, slightly, but Abrams's next words brought the tension snapping back. "But it's active, or at least, it was until very recently," she continued, holding up a small tablet that was wirelessly linked to her equipment. On the screen, a complex waveform and strings of data scrolled rapidly. It was emitting a low-power, encrypted signal. "We managed to isolate and decode a fragment of the transmission before it cut off." Marcus stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "Transmitting what?" "Coordinates," Abrams said grimly. "Highly precise, real-time GPS location data. This is a tracker, Marcus. Military grade, by the look of it. Sophisticated, miniaturized, and very, very effective. It was like a tiny, whispering beacon, stealing secrets and shouting her location to the enemy." Sarah's face went a shade paler. She looked down at her daughter, then back at the dissected toy, her hands tightening on Chloe's shoulders. "They found us again," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought we'd lost them in Boston, but they found us." Marcus turned toward her, his mind racing. "Who are they, Sarah? And who will be tracking your family with military hardware?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over and tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She held Chloe tighter, as if trying to physically shield her from the truth. My husband, David, he wasn't just a software engineer. He worked for a private cybersecurity contractor, Shield. He was the lead on a project developing a new kind of encrypted routing protocol for government communications. It was supposed to be unhackable. She took a shaky breath. For months ago, he uncovered something, a backdoor, a deliberate breach in the system's security. He believed someone was siphoning data, potentially selling it to hostile entities. He tried to report it through the proper channels, but before he could formally present his evidence, he disappeared. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The official report called it a boating accident. His small sailboat capsized during a storm on Lake George. They said he was alone, that it was a tragedy. She shook her head, a fierce, desperate denial, but I didn't believe it. David was an experienced sailor, and he was scared in the days before it happened. Really scared. He told me to trust no one from his work. Marcus exchanged a grim glance with Officer Jessup. So you think someone from this company, Shield, is targeting you? Marcus asked, keeping his voice low and calm. Sarah nodded weakly, her body slumping with exhaustion and grief. A week after his funeral, I started noticing cars following us. We get strange calls in the middle of the night, just heavy breathing. I changed our numbers. I moved us to a hotel, then to my cousin's place in Jersey. I thought we were safe. When I decided to take Chloe to my sister's in D.C., I thought we'd finally gotten away. Her voice broke into a sob. At the bus terminal in Newark, a man, he was so kind. He approached us at a newsstand. He noticed the stitching on Barnaby's ear was coming loose. He said he was a retired seamster, that he could fix it in a jiffy. I was so stressed, so paranoid about everything else. I thought it was a moment of human kindness. I let him take the toy for 5 minutes. I didn't know he was putting that thing inside it. The dogs, with their primal senses, had seen to the ruse that no human could have detected. Dr. Abrams interrupted the heavy silence. We traced the signal's last known recipient. The data was being pinged to a receiver that was very close by, likely within a few hundred meters of this terminal. Whoever was on the other end of this, she said, pointing at the eviscerated toy, knew exactly where she was in real time. As the technician spoke, Rex's head snapped up. His target wasn't the dissected toy anymore. It was the street outside, visible through the main entrance archways. Marcus followed his partner's line of sight. His eyes narrowed. There, idling illegally across 42nd Street, was a black SUV. It was sleek, nondescript, with tinted windows so dark they were like pools of ink. Its engine was running, a faint plume of exhaust visible in the cool morning air. Jessup's hand went immediately to his radio. We got a suspicious vehicle across 42nd, east side. Black SUV, no visible plates. Engine running. Marcus's hand went to his own radio. Get eyes on that vehicle now. I want a description of anyone inside. Do not approach. Just observe and report. Rex barked again, louder this time, more insistent, and the other dogs of the unit joined in, their cores rising into a unified roar of warning that echoed through the concourse. Every fiber of their being was radiating a single, clear purpose. There. The threat is there. Marcus looked at Sarah, then down at the child Chloe, who was now trembling in her mother's arms. Whatever this is, he said, his voice grim and resolute, it's not over yet. The SUV's headlights flicked on, 2 blinding white orbs in the dim morning light. The engine roared, a sudden, aggressive sound that was audible even to the thick terminal walls. Within seconds, the vehicle peeled away from the curb, tires screeching as it tore down 42nd Street, weaving violently into traffic. They're on the move. Jessup yelled into his radio. All available units, intercept that vehicle, eastbound on 42nd from Vanderbilt. Inside the terminal, Rex lunged toward the archway, barking furiously, his claws scraping against the marble floor. The rest of the K-9 unit joined him in a perfect, deafening unison. They had done their job. They had pinpointed the danger, and now they were watching escape. Through the glass, just for a split second as the SUV accelerated, Marcus saw the silhouette of the passenger turn his head. The man's face was partially illuminated by the glow of a dashboard screen, cold, expressionless, and utterly focused. He wasn't looking at the pursuing police cars. He was looking directly at the terminal, directly at them. Rex's growl deepened, his lips curling back to reveal his teeth. Then the vehicle swerved around a corner and disappeared into the labyrinth of Midtown, its tires skidding on the damp asphalt. Marcus stood motionless for a moment, the adrenaline a roaring torrent in his veins. The immediate, contained danger of the teddy bear was gone, but a new, more fluid and dangerous threat was now in motion. He glanced down at Rex, who still stared at the horizon, unblinking. The danger hadn't been neutralized. It had simply changed locations. And Marcus's gut, honed by years of experience and now perfectly aligned with his dog's instincts, told him with chilling certainty that this was far from over. The real game had just begun, and the players were now in the open. Outside the terminal, the world had become a blur of screaming engines and flashing lights. The black SUV, now a wounded animal with its tires shredded by a strategically deployed spike strip, fishtailed violently before slamming sideways into a row of newspaper kiosks with a deafening crash of twisting metal and shattering glass. The impact echoed across 42nd Street, a final, definitive end to its desperate flight. Before the dust could even settle, a perimeter of police cruisers encircled it, their doors flying open to disgorge a tactical team with weapons drawn. The air, already thick with the smell of burnt rubber and fear, now crackled with the tension of standoff. Hands where we can see them. Now, now, now. The shouted commands were sharp, absolute, and left no room for negotiation. The passenger side door was wrenched open from the outside. A man, his face contorted with rage and frustration, tumbled out, yelling obscenities in a language that wasn't English. He made a frantic, foolish lunge for an object tucked into his waistband, but he never stood a chance. Rex, released from Marcus's grip, moved like a black and tan missile, launching through the air and tackling the man to the asphalt with controlled, efficient force. His bark was a sharp report next to the suspect's ear, and his bite, though designed to hold and not maim, was enough to make the man scream and freeze in instant, terrified submission. The driver's side door was forced open simultaneously. The second man, the one with the cold, expressionless face Marcus had seen through the window, simply raised his hands. There was no struggle, no protest. He was dragged from the vehicle and pinned face down on the ground, his wrists secured behind his back with zip ties. His silence was somehow more menacing than his partner's frantic struggles. He didn't look at the officers. His gaze was fixed on some distant point on the horizon. Suspects in custody. Jessup's voice roared through the radio, breathless with adrenaline. Repeat, both subjects apprehended and secured. Inside the terminal, watching the scene unfold to the grand archways, Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He could feel the tension in Rex's body finally begin to ease, the low growl subsiding into a soft pant. He gave the dog a firm, reassuring pat on the flank, his fingers digging into the thick fur. "You did good, buddy. You always do." Within minutes, the crash site transformed from a tactical zone into a forensic one. Bomb techs, evidence specialists, and intelligence officers swarmed the wrecked SUV. They moved with practiced efficiency, photographing, bagging, and cataloging everything. From a mangled interior, they retrieved sleek laptops, a stack of false passports with expertly forged stamps, and several small, ruggedized encrypted hard drives that looked capable of surviving the crash. One of the techs, a young woman with a serious expression, held up a large evidence bag and called out, "Sergeant Thorne, you're going to want to see this." Marcus, with Rex walking calmly at his heel, approached the growing collection of evidence. Jessup joined him, his eyes wide. The tech held open the clear plastic bag. Inside were dozens of high-resolution surveillance photographs. The images were methodical, invasive. There was Sarah, caught in a long-distance lens, loading groceries into her car outside a supermarket in what looked like a different state. There was Chloe, smiling on a swing in a park, the photo timestamp from just 2 weeks prior. And there was David, the late husband and father, in several older images taken at what appeared to be his office building, his face unaware of the lens tracking his movements. Each photo was meticulously annotated with coordinates, timestamps, and even notes on daily routines. They'd been tracking this family for months. Marcus muttered, the sheer scale of the operation settling heavily on his shoulders. The teddy bear hadn't been the beginning. It was just the latest, most cruel tool in a long-running campaign of terror. This wasn't about one terminal. This is global, professional, back inside the terminal. The atmosphere was shifting from one of high-alert crisis to exhausted aftermath. The red emergency lights were finally switched off, and the normal, bright fluorescence of the station seemed almost blinding in contrast. The relentless blare of the alarms cut out, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The crowd of evacuated commuters and staff, now being allowed to trickle back into secured area, stood in a hushed, awed group. Sarah sat on the cold floor, no longer sobbing, but simply holding Chloe with a quiet, desperate strength. The child's tiny hands were fisted in her mother's shirt, her face buried in the fabric. But then, as the silence deepened, Chloe slowly turned her head. Her eyes, red-rimmed and puffy, found Rex. The Belgian Malinois, sensing the shift in the girl's attention, approached slowly. His earlier ferocity was completely gone, replaced by a gentle, almost humble demeanor. He lowered his massive head and sniffed the air around her, then cautiously pressed his wet nose into her open palm. Chloe blinked, startled for a moment. Then a sound emerged from her that was as pure and cleansing as sunlight breaking through storm clouds, a soft, watery giggle. Her small hand, which had been trembling moments before, reached up and wrapped around Rex's thick neck, burying her fingers in his fur. "Good dog," she whispered. The entire K-9 unit seemed to understand the significance of the moment. As one, they relaxed. One by one, the other 11 dogs lowered themselves to the floor, their tense postures melting away, their tails beginning to sway slowly, gently, back and forth. They formed a loose, peaceful circle around the mother and child, not as enforcers, but as guardians. Sarah looked up at Marcus, her eyes glistening with a fresh wave of tears. "You and your dogs. You saved us." I can't even." Marcus shook his head softly, a rare, genuine smile touching the corners of his mouth. "No, ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He did. He nodded toward Rex, who was now sitting proudly but humbly beside Chloe, accepting her gentle strokes as his rightful due. "We just follow his lead." Rex let out a soft whine and turned his head, licking Chloe's cheek once in a quick, sandpapery gesture. The little girl giggled again, a brighter, happier sound this time. "Good boy," she repeated, pressing her forehead against his. The Malinois stayed perfectly still. Around them, the gathered terminal staff and commuters began to applaud. It started as a few scattered claps, then grew, swelling into a full, heartfelt ovation. People clapped for the dogs, for the officers, for the mother and daughter who had been through hell and come out the other side, reunited. Marcus stood quietly, letting the moment wash over him. He knew the world would call this a miracle, but he knew better. It was instinct, dedication, and the unbreakable, unspoken bond between handler and dog. As Chloe buried her smiling face in Rex's fur, Sarah looked at Marcus, her expression one profound, life-altering gratitude. "He didn't just save us today," she said, her voice soft but clear. "He gave us back our future." And in that single quiet moment, every officer in the room felt the truth of it. This had been more than a rescue. It had been a redemption, a restoration of hope, paid for and encouraged and sealed with a dog's lick and a child's giggle. By the time the last police cruiser pulled away from 42nd Street, its lights off and its purpose fulfilled, a heavy, profound stillness had settled over Grand Central Terminal. The chaos, the sirens, the shouting, all of it had faded, receding like a violent tide and leaving behind a quiet hum of distant commuter trains and the soft, murmuring voices of a world trying to make sense of what it had just witnessed. Sergeant Marcus Thorne stood by one of the massive archways, his posture finally slackening after hours of coiled tension. His reflection in the glass was ghostly, framed by the pale, soft glow of the midday sun as it finally broke through the dissipating clouds. The morning was gone, and the afternoon was dawning on the aftermath of a nightmare. Rex sat at his feet, silent now. The Malinois' head rested on his paws, his eyes half closed, but his ears remained subtly active, twitching at the sound of a distant announcement or a closing door. The relentless energy that had vibrated through him for the last hour had ebbed, replaced by a calm, watchful exhaustion. For the first time since the alert began, Marcus allowed himself to take a full, deep, cleansing breath. The receding adrenaline left a deep, bodily ache in its wake. He turned from his reflection and let his gaze sweep across the main concourse. His officers looked drained, their uniforms rumpled, their faces smudged with grime and fatigue. But they were alive. They moved slowly now, coordinating with terminal security to fully stand down the emergency protocols. The crowd of commuters, those who had chosen to stay or who were now being allowed to reclaim their belongings, stood in small, hushed groups. They weren't panicked anymore. They were reverent, their eyes constantly drifting toward the center of the room, where a mother held her daughter and where a team of dogs sat in a peaceful circle. Marcus's eyes found Sarah and Chloe. Sarah was on her feet now, holding Chloe on her hip. The little girl's head was nestled on her mother's shoulder, her thumb in her mouth, her eyes drowsy. A paramedic was quietly speaking to Sarah, checking her vitals with soft, professional demeanor. As if sensing his gaze, Chloe lifted her head. Her tired eyes found Rex, and she gave a tiny, weak wave. Immediately, the shepherd's ears perked up. His tail thumped once, twice, against the polished marble, a slow, gentle wag of acknowledgement. Marcus's throat tightened. He looked down at the dog, then back at the child. "They don't just save lives," he murmured to Jessup, who had stepped up beside him, also watching the scene. "Sometimes they save what's left of our faith." Jessup nodded quietly, his usual sharp humor replaced by a thoughtful solemnity. "They see things we never will, Marcus. They operate on a frequency we lost a long time ago. Today there were our eyes and ears in a place we're all blind and deaf." Marcus placed a hand on Rex's back, feeling the steady, strong heartbeat beneath his palm. The fur was warm, the body solid and real. "Yeah," he said softly, the word laden with meaning. "And thank God for that." Outside, the sky continued to brighten, the clouds parting to reveal a clear, bright blue. The first Metro North train since the lockdown began was being prepared for departure, its conductor making a calm announcement. For the commuters lining up at the gate, their journey was just resuming a routine trip. For Marcus and his team, it felt like something else entirely had ended, and something new, something significant, had just been born. The terminal's operations were slowly returning to normal, but the psychological landscape was forever altered. The iconic clock no longer just represented a meeting point. It now marked the epicenter of a miracle. The whispers of the commuters weren't just about delayed schedules. They were hushed, off-field recounts of the circle of dogs and the little girl in red. As the forensic teams began to pack their equipment and the last of the emergency vehicles dispersed, a senior terminal administrator approached Marcus. "Sergeant, we can't thank you enough. The way your unit handled this, I've never seen anything like it." Marcus nodded, his eyes still on Rex. "The credit isn't mine. It's his, and the rest of the team. They're the ones who saw what we couldn't." The administrator followed his gaze to the Malinois, who was now lying down, his head on his paws, watching the flow of people with a tranquil alertness. "He's a remarkable animal. They all are." As the afternoon wore on, the terminal began to fill again with the normal ebb and flow of city life. But beneath the restored rhythm, a new current of awareness hummed. People looked at the police K-9 units with newfound respect, a deeper understanding of the silent, instinctual power they represented. The story was already spreading beyond the marble walls, rippling out into the city, but here at its source, a quiet, hard-won peace had settled. Marcus knew the paperwork, the debriefings, and the media inquiries were still come. But for this single, suspended moment, standing in the grand concourse with his partner at his side, he allowed himself to simply breathe it in. The crisis was over. The immediate threat was neutralized. The mother and child were safe. He looked down at Rex, whose calm, steady presence was an anchor in the shifting tides of the day. The dog looked up, meeting his eyes, and gave a slow, contented blink. No words were needed. The bond between them, forged in fire and tempered by trust, was the one unshakable truth in a world that had, for a few terrifying hours, been turned upside down. The storm had passed, but as Marcus watched the crowd, he felt a familiar prickle of intuition. The calm they now enjoyed was not an ending. It was the eye of the hurricane. The other side of the storm was still out there, gathering its strength. It was only a matter of time before it made its presence known again. 2 weeks later, the world was still talking about the Grand Central Miracle. The footage of Rex and the K-9 unit had been viewed, analyzed, and celebrated millions of times. News anchors and security experts debated the science behind the dog's instincts, calling them guardians with senses that defied modern technology. Children across the city mailed in crayon drawings of Belgian Malinois, wearing proudly drawn police badges, their stick-figure handlers standing beside them. Strangers sent bouquets of flowers, heartfelt letters, and boxes of premium dog treats to the unit's headquarters, their gratitude spilling over in handwritten notes and carefully chosen toys. But for Sergeant Marcus Thorne, the external noise, the fame, the interview requests he continued to decline. The public adoration was just static. It was background hum to the quiet, steady rhythm of his work and the bond he shared with a partner. None of the outside attention could compare to the invitation that arrived one crisp, clear morning. They were asked to visit the hospital where Chloe was being kept for a final round of checkups and psychological evaluation. The hospital halls were a world away from the echoing, chaotic terminal. They were quiet, sanitized, and filled with the soft, rhythmic beeping of monitors and the faint, clean smell of antiseptic. Marcus walked slowly, Rex heeling perfectly at his side, the dog's nails clicking softly on the linoleum floor. He felt a strange nervousness fluttering in his own chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his first days as a rookie officer. This wasn't a confrontation with suspect. It was a different kind of meeting entirely, one where the stakes felt just as high, but in a profoundly human way. As they entered the room, lit by the gentle morning sun streaming through the window, Chloe's face, which had been pale and drawn in the news clips, instantly lit up. Her eyes, those wide sapphire blue eyes that had held so much terror, now sparkled with pure, unadulterated joy. "Rex!" she squealed, her voice still a little weak, but filled with undeniable energy. She sat up straighter in the bed, her small arms opening wide in a universal gesture of welcome. Rex's disciplined heel broke. His tail began to wag furiously, a happy, sweeping motion that stirred the air in the quiet room. He looked up at Marcus, as if asking for permission, his entire body wriggling with barely contained excitement. Marcus gave a soft, almost imperceptible nod. "Go on, buddy." The Malinois padded forward, his movement now fluid and gentle. He approached the bed and, in a gesture of exquisite care, placed his head on the mattress right beside Chloe's hand. She giggled, the sound like music after the silence of the past weeks, and immediately buried her fingers in the thick fur of his neck. "Mommy, look," she said, her voice brimming with wonder. He remembered me. Sarah, who was sitting in a chair beside the bed, smiled, tears of sheer happiness welling in her eyes. She looked tired, the shadows of their ordeal still under her eyes, but there was a new peace in her expression, a weight that had finally been lifted. "Of course he did, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Heroes never forget the ones they save." Marcus stood respectfully near the doorway, his chest feeling too tight for his uniform. He had witnessed bravery in combat zones, courage in the face of natural disasters, and resilience in countless terrible situations. But this quiet, unassuming moment of connection between a child and the animal that had literally stood between her and a terrible fate was a different kind of heroism altogether. Sarah turned her gaze from her daughter to Marcus. "Sergeant Thorne," she began, her voice soft but steady. I never got to thank you properly. That day was such a blur of fear. I don't think I formed a coherent sentence." Marcus shook his head, finally finding his voice. "You don't have to, Sarah. Really. Just seeing her there, smiling like that's thanks enough for a lifetime. Knowing you both made it through, that you have a future ahead of you, that's the entire point of the job." She smiled through her tears, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Still," she insisted softly, "I think you should know. The doctors and the counselors, they've all said it. If you hadn't found us when you did, if Rex hadn't reacted with such speed and certainty, Chloe and I wouldn't have survived that day. Those men, they weren't just tracking us. The bomb squad found enough evidence on their devices to suggest they were preparing to remove us, to silence us for good. She paused, swallowing hard, unable to speak the darker words aloud. Rex didn't just save us from being followed. He gave us a second chance at life. He gave me back my daughter. Marcus felt the truth of her words settle deep in his soul. This was a reality that the news cameras couldn't capture. Rex, as if understanding the gravity of the conversation, looked up from Chloe's affectionate strokes, his deep brown eyes seeming to hold a wisdom that belied his canine nature. In the quiet hospital room, under the soft, warm light, he looked calm and utterly at peace. Sarah then reached for a small, folded piece of paper on the bedside table. It was lined notebook paper, the kind a child would use. She handed it to Marcus. Chloe wanted to write something for him. She worked on it all yesterday. Marcus took the note, his fingers feeling suddenly clumsy. He unfolded it carefully. Inside, in the large, uneven, and lovingly drawn handwriting of a 4-year-old, was a message. Some letters were backwards, the lines wobbled, but the meaning was crystal clear. Thank you for being my angel. For a long moment, Marcus couldn't speak. The simple, pure faith in those 5 words closed his throat with an emotion so powerful it was almost overwhelming. He looked from a note to Rex, who had now rested his chin back on the bed, his eyes closed in contentment as Chloe gently scratched behind his ears. He looked at the little girl, who was whispering secrets into the dog's fur, and then at her mother, who watched him with an expression of boundless love. He carefully refolded the note and placed it in the chest pocket of his uniform, right over his heart. He nodded at Sarah, a silent communication of understanding and shared gratitude that needed no words. Outside the hospital window, the sun climbed higher, casting a warm, golden glow across the room, illuminating the little girl and her hero in a soft, almost divine light. Marcus smiled faintly, a true, unguarded smile of complete and utter fulfillment. "Come on, partner," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Another mission complete. And as man and dog left the hospital that day, walking side by side back into the world, they didn't just represent a great story or a viral sensation. They were a living, breathing testament to a truth the world had been so eager to embrace, that sometimes the greatest hearts, the most courageous spirits, and the truest angels do indeed walk on 4 legs. A growing pile of stuffed toys, flowers, and thank you cards formed a makeshift memorial at the K-9 unit's main gate, the chain-link fences now adorned with blue and gold ribbons. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of pride and weary adjustment. The dogs, blissfully unaware of their global fame, slipped back into their familiar routines of training, feeding, and rest with simple, satisfying ease. But for their human handlers, the return to normal was a more complex transition. During routine patrols, Marcus found himself watching Rex more intently, searching for the subtlest twitch of an ear or a change in breathing that might indicate another hidden threat. He second-guessed his own perceptions, waiting for a signal from his partner that might never come. The world, which had once felt largely predictable, now seemed layered with invisible dangers. This reliance was both a comfort and a source of stress. It was humbling to acknowledge that his own human senses were so limited, but it was also profoundly reassuring to have a partner who could navigate that unseen world. The media, though respectfully kept at a distance, continued to spin the story. A respected journalist published a lengthy feature article titled "The Unseen Shield: How AK-9s Knows Rewrote Security Protocol." The article speculated about the device in the teddy bear and the international implications of the plot. It positioned Rex and his unit not as lucky animals, but as essential, advanced pieces of law enforcement technology, living, breathing sensors that were immune to hacking, jamming, or technological failure. This shift in perception had tangible effects. City council meetings saw proposals for increased funding for the K-9 unit. Security experts debated how to integrate K-9 instincts more deeply with electronic surveillance. Marcus was tasked with reviewing letters from the public, a duty he found both moving and strangely draining. One letter, from a father in Queens, stood out. He wrote that his daughter, who had always been terrified of large dogs, had watched a video of Rex and Chloe and now begged for a Belgian Malinois puppy. "You didn't just save a little girl," he wrote. "You helped my little girl conquer fear. You showed her that true strength is gentle." Marcus read the letter twice, then pinned it to the bulletin board in the unit's common room. Meanwhile, the legal and intelligence machinery grinded on. The two captured suspects, identified as low-level operatives for a shadowy private intelligence firm, were being processed through the federal system. They provided limited information, but combined with the data extracted from their encrypted drives, a clearer picture emerged. The plot had indeed been about accessing David's proprietary communication technology. The family had been targeted as the most vulnerable link. Sarah and Chloe, now under new identities and relocated through a federal witness protection program, were beginning the long process of rebuilding their lives. The last update Marcus received was that Chloe had started preschool. She had told her new teacher that her best friend was a police dog named Rex. Weeks turned into a month. The vibrant colors of the flowers at the gate faded to brittle browns, and the influx of fan mail slowed to a steady trickle. The news cycle moved on. For Marcus and Rex, this was a relief. The slow fade from the public eye allowed them to settle into a new, more profound version of their partnership. The anxiety Marcus felt began to dissipate, replaced by a deeper, more implicit trust. He no longer watched Rex for signs of danger. He simply worked alongside him, confident that if a threat emerged, his partner would signal it. One evening, during a late-night shift, Marcus and Rex were conducting a final patrol of the quiet subway platforms beneath Grand Central. The air was cool and carried the distinct, damp smell of the tunnels. Rex, who had been walking calmly at heel, suddenly stopped, his head lifted, ears pricking forward. Marcus felt a jolt of old adrenaline, his hand tightening on the leash. He followed Rex's gaze to a dark maintenance alcove. A shadow moved. Marcus's heart hammered for a single, painful beat before a large rat scurried out from behind a pipe, glanced at them with beady eyes, and disappeared into a grate. Rex let out a soft woof and looked up at Marcus, almost apologetically, before resuming his walk. Marcus laughed, a real, hearty laugh that echoed in the vast, empty space. The sound surprised him. He reached down and scratched Rex behind the ears. "Just a rat, buddy. Good boy for checking, though." In that simple, mundane moment, Marcus realized they had finally found it. The new normal. It wasn't about constant, high-stakes alertness. It was about a quiet partnership, a shared vigilance, and the understanding that even when the world wasn't watching, they were a team. They were guardians. And as they continued their patrol under the flickering fluorescent lights, man and dog walked on, ready for whatever came next. The day began not just with the scent of cleaning supplies and dog food, but with the rustle of paper, dozens of letters that had to be sorted, read, and often responded to. A civilian public relations officer had been temporarily assigned to them, a cheerful woman named Maria, whose primary job was to manage the deluge of goodwill without letting it disrupt the unit's core mission. Marcus found himself spending the first hour of his shift not on patrol briefings, but signing oversized, glossy photographs of Rex for charity auctions and children's hospitals. He performed the duty with a quiet sense of obligation. If this attention could help the department or bring a moment of joy to a sick child, he would wield the pen. The most significant change, however, was in their training protocols. The event at Grand Central had been a live-fire case study in canine instinct surpassing technological and human perception. The department's top trainers, in collaboration with behavioral scientists, developed a new, advanced training module. The goal was no longer just to train the dogs to detect known threats like narcotics or explosives. Now, they were creating complex, multi-layered scenarios designed to test and hone the dog's ability to identify anomalous threat indicators, situations where the danger wasn't a specific scent but a pattern of wrongness. Marcus and Rex were the test subjects for the first of these new drills. They were led into a mock-up of a bustling hotel lobby, complete with fake plants, furniture, and actor civilians. Their objective was simple: conduct a routine sweep. But the environment was designed to overload the senses with distracting, benign smells, perfumes, food, cleaning agents. Hidden within this sensory noise was a single, non-threatening element that was out of place. In this first drill, it was a specific, rare type of industrial lubricant, a scent none of the dogs had been formally trained on, placed on the handle of a briefcase carried by one of the actors. Marcus moved through the space, his own senses noting nothing amiss. The actors chatted and read newspapers. It all seemed perfectly normal. But after just 30 seconds, Rex slowed. His easy patrol gait shifted to a deliberate, cautious walk. He bypassed a woman wearing strong perfume, ignored a discarded food wrapper, and zeroed in on the man with the briefcase. He didn't sit, the trained final response for a found substance. Instead, he froze, his body going rigid, his head cocked, and he let out a low, questioning whine. He was alerting, but to a threat he didn't have a defined category for. He knew it was wrong. "That's it. Perfect," the lead trainer exclaimed, stepping out from behind a one-way mirror. "That's exactly the behavioral marker we're looking for. Not a trained response, but a cognitive one. He's telling you, this doesn't belong here. Not, I found explosives." Marcus knelt, rubbing Rex's shoulders vigorously. "Good boy. Such a good boy." The drill proved that the terminal wasn't a fluke. It was a reproducible skill, a higher level of intelligence and intuition that could be cultivated. The public's desire to connect with the heroes was also channeled into a new, controlled initiative. The department organized a single, tightly managed Community Appreciation Day at the K-9 facility. It was an invitation-only event for the families of first responders and the children from the local hospital's pediatric ward. On the day of the event, the training yard was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Children in wheelchairs or holding their parents' hands watched in awe as the dogs demonstrated obedience drills and simple agility courses. Rex, of course, was the main attraction. Marcus walked him slowly through the crowd, and the Malinois seemed to understand his role perfectly. He was calm and gentle, allowing small, hesitant hands to pat his back, turn his head to avoid licking faces, but wagging his tail constantly. One little boy, no older than Chloe, with a bald head from chemotherapy, sat cross-legged on the grass, too shy to approach. Marcus guided Rex over. The dog sniffed the boy's offered hand, and, in a move that made Marcus's heart stop, he carefully lay down in front of the child, rolling onto his side to expose his belly, a universal canine gesture of trust and submission. The boy's face broke into a wide, gap-toothed grin, and he leaned forward, burying his face in Rex's fur. The boy's mother, watching with tears in her eyes, snapped a picture. Amidst this new routine of training in public relations, a low-priority case file landed on Marcus's desk. It was a report from a patrol officer about a series of petty thefts from luggage storage lockers in the terminal's lower levels. Small, high-value items like jewelry and electronics were going missing. But one detail caught Marcus's eye. The security log showed no signs of forced entry on the targeted lockers, and internal cameras had been disabled not by hacking, but by a small, crude device that created a localized power drain, a blip in the system just long enough for the theft to occur. It was sloppy, almost amateurish, compared to the high-tech espionage of the Parker case. But the method of creating a small, invisible blind spot nagged at Marcus. It felt familiar in its principle. He decided to take Rex for a walk around the reported theft sites, not expecting to find anything, but treating it as an informal training exercise in a new, anomalous threat protocol. The lower-level corridor was a stark, utilitarian space, a contrast to the grandeur above. Marcus let Rex off-leash to explore. They turned a corner into a secluded hallway lined with lockers. Rex, who had been trotting casually, suddenly froze. His head snapped to the right, towards a ventilation grate near the ceiling. The easy-going posture was gone in an instant, replaced by the same focused rigidity Marcus had seen in the training drill. He let out a soft, low growl, his eyes fixed on the grate. Marcus's instincts went on high alert. This wasn't the alert for explosives or drugs. This was the anomalous threat alert. He approached slowly. He saw nothing at first, just a standard, dusty grate. But then he noticed it. A tiny, almost invisible filament of wire, no thicker than human hair, ran from the edge of the grate and disappeared into a crack in the concrete wall. It was a sensor, a primitive but effective early warning system. This wasn't just petty theft. This was an organized operation with counter-surveillance measures. The method was crude, but the thinking was sophisticated. They were creating their own blind spots, just on a smaller, criminal scale. "Good boy," Marcus whispered to Rex, his mind already racing. He called a fine into dispatch, requesting a full forensic team. The petty theft case had just been elevated. As he waited, looking down at the dog who was again the key to uncovering a hidden layer of danger, Marcus realized the ripple effect of their terminal ordeal was still spreading. It had changed them, sharpened them, and now it was leading them to new threats hiding in the unlikeliest of places. The world was full of hidden grates and invisible wires, and he was grateful, more than ever, to have a partner who could see them. The discovery of the tripwire transformed the dusty hallway from a minor theft scene into the focal point of a major operation. The forensic team arrived within minutes, their white suits a stark contrast to the grimy industrial backdrop. They worked with silent efficiency, documenting the nearly invisible filament. Marcus stood back with Rex, watching. The Malinois was calm now, but his eyes remained fixed on the ventilation grate, his body still humming with residual energy. Officer Jessup approached, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "This changes everything, Marcus. Petty thieves don't set up early warning systems. This is a professional setup." "Tell me about it," Marcus replied, his gaze sweeping the ceiling. "It's crude, but the thinking is advanced. They're using low-tech solutions to create high-tech blind spots. It means they're probably still close." The lead forensic tech walked over, holding a small evidence bag. It's homemade but effective. A simple magnetic switch connected to a pager motor. When the grate is moved, it sends a vibration signal. The range can't be more than a few hundred feet. Whoever is on the other end knows we're here. Marcus's radio crackled. "Sergeant Thorne, we've got a hit. The blueprints show a network of old maintenance corridors behind these walls. That grate is an access point." A tactical plan solidified in Marcus's mind. The thieves were using the terminal's own forgotten infrastructure against it. "I want a full tactical team to secure the perimeter. Jessup, you're with me. We're going in." Rex, hearing the change in Marcus's tone, stood at immediate attention. The team moved quickly, setting up a secure perimeter while Marcus, Jessup, and two other officers prepared to breach the grate. They were joined by a technician with a compact, wheeled robot equipped with a camera. With a quiet, metallic screech, the grate was carefully pried open, revealing a dark, narrow shaft descending into blackness. A damp, musty smell wafted out. The robot was sent down first. On the tablet screen, they watched the camera feed as it emerged into a narrow, brick-lined corridor lit by dim, battery-powered work lights. The corridor was cluttered with discarded packing materials and empty water bottles. "This is their stash house," Jessup whispered, peering at the screen. "They've been down there for a while." Marcus nodded. "They're using the terminal's blind spots as their own private highway." He looked at Rex. The dog was sniffing the air at the entrance of the shaft, his tail giving a slow, deliberate wag. He wasn't alerting to danger. He was tracking. The scent trail was fresh. The tactical team leader gave the signal. "Clear to proceed. We have the exterior secured." Marcus took a deep breath. "Rex, seek." The command was all the Malinois needed. He plunged into the darkness of the shaft, his powerful body navigating the descent with ease. Marcus and Jessup followed, their tactical flashlights cutting beams through the gloom. The corridor stretched ahead, a long, straight line of shadows and dim light. They moved slowly, methodically, checking side passages. The place was a labyrinth, a forgotten world beneath the bustling terminal. After about 50 yards, Rex slowed, his nose pressed to the ground. He led them to a side room, its door a heavy, sliding metal panel slightly ajar. Marcus signaled for Jessup to take one side, while he took the other. With a coordinated shove, they slid the door fully open. The room beyond was a makeshift command center. A bank of monitors, now dark, was set up on a folding table, wires snaking across the floor to a cluster of car batteries. Shelves lined the walls, filled with sorted stacks of stolen electronics, phones, tablets, laptops. But it was what was on the central table that made Marcus's blood run cold. Spread out was a detailed, hand-drawn map of the terminal's main concourse. Encircled in red was the iconic gold clock. "It's not a coincidence," Jessup said, his voice hushed. "They were studying our site." Marcus's mind raced. Were these thieves inspired by the notoriety of the location, or was there a more sinister connection? Before he could voice his theories, a noise echoed from deeper in the corridor, a faint scuffling sound. Rex's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was looking down the dark passageway, his body tense. "They're still here," Marcus whispered. The team moved out of the room and continued down the main corridor, their movements now silent and precise. The corridor ended at a T-junction. Marcus pointed left and Jessup nodded, taking the right path with one other officer. Marcus and Rex went left. The passage here was narrower, the ceiling lower. Rex led the way, his nose constantly working. They passed several small, empty rooms. Then, at the end of the passage, a sliver of light shone from under a closed door. Marcus approached cautiously. He could hear faint, frantic movements from inside, the sound of someone packing in a hurry. He looked at Rex and pointed to the door. The shepherd understood. He positioned himself to the side, ready to move the moment the door opened. Marcus took a deep breath, then raised his foot and kicked the door hard. The flimsy lock shattered, and the door flew inward with a crash. "Police, don't move," Marcus shouted, sweeping the room with his flashlight. A single figure, a young man with a gaunt, terrified face, froze. He was surrounded by half-packed duffel bags. He held a laptop in his hands, poised to smash it on the concrete floor. "Drop it, now," Marcus commanded. The man hesitated, his eyes wide with panic. In that split second, Rex took a single step forward and let out a deep, guttural bark that echoed in the small space. The sound was pure, primal authority. The man yelped, his nerves shattering. The laptop clattered to the concrete floor, unharmed. He threw his hands into the air. "Don't let him bite me. Please, I give up." As Jessup and the other officer arrived to secure the suspect, Marcus looked around the room. It was a sleeping quarters, with a cot and more maps pinned to the wall. These weren't just thieves. They were squatters, living in the bowels of the terminal. While the suspect was being read his rights, Marcus's phone vibrated. It was a message from the intelligence unit. The preliminary interrogation of the two operatives from the Parker case had yielded a lead. The private intelligence firm they worked for was known to sometimes hire local, low-level criminal elements for logistical support, creating diversions, gathering intel, providing safe houses. As Marcus looked at the terrified young man in handcuffs, a chilling possibility began to form. What if this wasn't just a random theft ring? What if their presence here, directly under the main concourse, wasn't a coincidence? The hidden world beneath the terminal was proving to be far more connected to the world above than anyone could have imagined. And once again, Rex had been the key to pulling back the curtain. The suspect, who identified himself as Leo Vance, was a far cry from the cold, professional operatives captured after the SUV chase. He was jittery, pale, and his eyes darted around the interrogation room as if expecting the walls to close in on him. Marcus observed him from behind the one-way mirror. While in the room, Officer Jessup leaned casually against the wall, letting the silence stretch. Rex sat placidly in the corner of the observation room, his attention fixed on the man through the glass, his head tilted. "Those maps, Leo," Jessup began, his voice deceptively calm. "The ones of the gold clock. You want to tell us why you were so interested in that specific spot?" "I told you, I don't know anything about that. I just found those maps." Leo's voice was a reedy whine. "We were just taking some stuff, that's all. Phones, laptops, nothing big. Nothing big." Jessup pushed off the wall and placed his hands on the table, leaning in. "You had a hidden command center. You had tripwires. You were living in the walls of an international transit hub. That's not nothing big, Leo. That's a whole new level of ambition. Who were you working for?" "I work alone." "It was my idea," he insisted, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Marcus spoke quietly into a microphone. "Ask him about the ventilation system access near Track 29. Jessup relayed the question. Leo's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Attell, I don't know what you're talking about. From the observation room, Rex let out a very soft, almost inaudible whine, his nose pressing against the glass. He was reacting to the man's spike of fear. He's lying about the access point. Marcus said into Mike, "Press him on it." Jessup didn't question the order. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "See, Leo, I think you do know. I think someone paid you to know. I think they gave you a job down there, something a little different from stealing smartphones. And I think you're terrified of what they'll do to you if you talk." The color drained from Leo's face. He started to shake, wrapping his arms around himself. "I can't." "You don't understand. They'll kill me." "Who, Leo?" Jessup's voice was firm but not unkind. "Who will kill you? Give me a name. Help us help you." Tears welled in the young man's eyes. They never gave names. It was just a voice on an encrypted chat. A job. A one-time payment in cryptocurrency. What was the job? Jessup pressed. They wanted us to create a distraction. A big one. On that day. The day with the dogs and the little girl. The words tumbled out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would lessen their impact. In the observation room, Marcus stood up straighter, his full focus on the man in the interrogation room. "What kind of distraction?" Jessup asked, his own composure visibly strained. "Smoke," Leo whispered, looking down at his hands. "They wanted us to trigger a smoke bomb in the ventilation system near the main concourse. Not a fire, just smoke. Enough to cause panic, to pull security away, to create chaos. They said it was part of a corporate espionage test, a stress test of terminal security. I swear, I didn't know about the little girl. I didn't know about any tracker. We were just supposed to release the smoke at a specific time." "But you didn't," Jessup stated. Leo shook his head, a sob catching in his throat. "No, we chickened out. When we saw the K-9 units coming through, we got spooked. We aborted. We never triggered the device. It's probably still down there, in the ductwork near the gold clock." The pieces slammed together in Marcus's mind with the force of physical blow. The men in the SUV, the tracker on Chloe, were one part of the plan. Leo and his team were the other. The smoke bomb was meant to be the catalyst, the perfect diversion. In the panic of potential fire, security would have been overwhelmed, evacuations would have been chaotic, and the K-9 unit's strange behavior around the little girl might have been misinterpreted or outright ignored in the scramble. It would have been a perfect cover to either snatch Chloe and Sarah in confusion or to allow the SUV to get away cleanly. Marcus keyed his radio, his voice urgent. "We need a full EOD and hazmat sweep of the ventilation system near the main concourse immediately. Tell them we have a report of an unexploded incendiary device." He then looked back at Rex. The dog was still watching Leo, but his body had relaxed. The source of the tension had been identified, the truth pulled into the light. Jessup left the interrogation room and joined Marcus behind the mirror. "A smoke bomb," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "It makes sense. It's the perfect non-lethal diversion. In that chaos, they could have done anything." Marcus nodded, his gaze still fixed on the sobbing Leo Vance. "He's small fish, a pawn, but he just gave us a crucial look at the game board. This wasn't just about tracking and data theft. This was an active extraction or abduction plan. They were going to take them right out of the terminal during the panic." The revelation elevated the Parker case to an even higher level of severity. It was no longer just espionage. It was an attempted kidnapping on U.S. soil. Later that evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the station, his captain called him into his office. "The feds are taking over the Parker case completely, Marcus. And this new angle with the smoke bomb? They're ecstatic. It's the concrete link they needed between the low-level logistics and the high-level operatives. Your work, and that dog of yours, just cracked this thing wide open." Marcus accepted the praise with a nod, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of Sarah and Chloe, safe in their new lives, completely unaware of how close they had come to an even darker fate. Walking out to his car with Rex trotting beside him, the cool night air felt heavy with the weight of the day's revelations. The world was a web of interconnected plots and hidden dangers. But as he opened the car door for Rex, who jumped in and settled into the passenger seat with a contented sigh, Marcus felt a familiar sense of purpose settle over him. It was his job, and Rex's, to untangle those webs, one thread at a time, no matter how deeply they were hidden. The following week was a whirlwind of federal agents, sealed indictments, and closed-door briefings. The NYPD, and Marcus's unit in particular, became a temporary annex of a much larger, shadowy machinery of national security. Men and women in dark suits moved through the precinct with quiet authority. They debriefed Marcus for hours, their questions precise and exhaustive. They were particularly interested in Rex's behavior, not just as an anecdote, but as data. They recorded Marcus's descriptions of the dog's alerts, his posture, the subtleties of his growls, with the intensity of scientists documenting a new natural phenomenon. Marcus cooperated fully, but the process was draining. It felt like dissecting a miracle until it became just a series of biological and environmental reactions. One of the senior agents, a man with sharp eyes named Fletcher, summed it up. Your dog, Sergeant Thorne, represents a nonlinear variable. He operates outside the predictive models our adversaries use. They can hack our networks and spoof our sensors, but they can't hack a dog's instinct. It's a vulnerability in their system that they never accounted for. Marcus gave a curt nod to the agent, then turned away to kneel beside Rex, focusing on adjusting the dog's collar. These agents saw Rex as a tool and asset. They didn't see the partner who slept at the foot of his bed, who got excited when Marcus picked up his favorite tennis ball. The information from Leo Vance and the two captured operatives was cross-referenced with other intelligence. The private intelligence firm, Aegis Solutions, was a deniable proxy for a foreign government. Their goal had been to acquire David's communication protocol and eliminate his family. The tracker was a linchpin, and the aborted smoke bomb was the planned curtain for the final, brutal act. The failure of the operation, triggered by Rex's inexplicable focus, had exposed a cell and disrupted a multi-million-dollar intelligence-gathering operation. As the federal case solidified, the external pressure on Marcus's unit began to ease. The news cycles moved on. The flood of mail slowed. The unit was settling back into a rhythm, albeit a forever altered one. One rainy Tuesday evening, long after his shift had ended, Marcus found himself alone in the K-9 unit's common room. The lights were dim, the only sound the steady patter of rain against the windows and the soft, rhythmic snoring of Rex. Stretched out on his favorite dog bed, Marcus scrolled through the official, redacted report on his tablet. The dry, legal language described the saving of 2 lives and the thwarting of a major threat. It was all there in black and white, but it felt incomplete. He looked at Rex, at the peaceful rise and fall of his chest. In the quiet of the room, the memory of that day played back not as a sequence of tactical decisions, but as a series of emotional impressions. The terrified confusion in Chloe's eyes, the raw sound of Sarah's scream, the feel of the cold, heavy toy in his hand, and through it all the constant, unwavering presence of the dog, now sleeping so soundly beside him. He thought about the bond they shared. It wasn't just about training and commands. It was a language that existed beneath words, a synchronicity built on thousands of hours of shared experiences. He trusted Rex with his life, and he knew that Rex trusted him with his. The dog didn't obey him because of a hierarchy. He worked with him because of a partnership. Marcus stood up and walked over to the bulletin board, to the letter from the father in Queens. You showed her that true strength is gentle. That was closer to the truth. The strength in the terminal wasn't the barking or the bare teeth. It was in the circle of protection, the deliberate choice to shield rather than attack. It was in the gentle nuzzle to a terrified child hand. Rex's greatest power wasn't his bite. It was his heart. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Sarah, sent through the secure channel the feds had set up. Chloe lost her first tooth today. She told the tooth fairy that she wants the money to buy a big box of dog treats. She hasn't forgotten. We never will. Thank you for everything. S. Marcus felt a smile spread across his face, warm and genuine. This was the report that mattered. This was the data that was worth more than any intelligence briefing. A little girl, in a safe place, thinking about a dog who saved her. He typed back a simple reply. Tell her Rex says thank you in advance. Take care of each other. He walked back to his sleeping partner and knelt down, not to give command, but simply to be near him. He rested a hand on Rex's side, feeling the solid, living warmth, the steady heartbeat. The dog stirred, opened one eye and gave a slow, contented wag of his tail before sighing and settling back into sleep. In that moment, Marcus understood the full weight and the full privilege of his badge. It wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about guarding the fragile, precious things, a child's smile, a mother's hope, the simple, trusting bond between a human and an animal. The world was full of darkness and complexity, of hidden grates and invisible wires, of men in black SUVs and suits who saw people and dogs as assets and variables. But it was also full of light. And as Marcus sat on the floor in the quiet, rain-soaked night, his hand on his sleeping friend, he knew with absolute clarity that his purpose was to stand with this incredible creature at his side and fight for that light. However they could, for as long as they could. A year later, a small, solemn ceremony was held in the terminal's newly dedicated Guardian's atrium. The space, formerly a quiet seating area near the gold clock, now featured a reflecting pool, benches, and a life-size bronze statue at its center. The statue depicted a vigilant Belgian Malinois sitting tall, a young girl resting her hand trustingly on his back. The plaque read, "In gratitude for the unseen guardians among us." Marcus and Rex were guests of honor. As the mayor spoke about courage and community, Marcus stood at attention, Rex sitting perfectly at heel beside him. The dog seemed to understand the occasion's solemnity. His ears perked, his gaze calm but aware. He was older now, a touch of gray dusting his muzzle, but his eyes held the same keen intelligence. Marcus's mind drifted during the speeches. He thought of the past year. The federal case against Aegis Solutions continued, a complex web of international law. But the responsible cell was dismantled. The advanced training protocols developed from their experience were now being adopted nationwide. His unit had received a presidential citation, but these accolades felt distant. What felt real were the smaller changes. The way new officers looked at Rex with awe and respect. The continued letters from children inspired to become police officers or vets. The unshakable bond between him and his partner. A bond that needed no words. After the ceremony, a young boy broke from his parents and approached Rex, his steps hesitant. Marcus nodded. Rex lowered his head, sniffing the boy's fingers before giving a gentle lick. The boy's nervousness melted into a radiant smile. It was a scene that had repeated all year. Rex had become more than police dog. He was a bridge, a symbol of safety a child could understand. Later, Marcus and Rex walked through a park overlooking the city. It was their ritual, a time to decompress. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows. Rex trotted ahead, exploring familiar scents with the leisurely pace of a veteran. Marcus watched him, a profound peace settling over him. The anxiety that had plagued him was gone, replaced by resilient trust. He thought of Sarah and Chloe, living quietly somewhere under their new identities. He hoped Chloe was laughing in a schoolyard, her memories softened by time and the knowledge she was protected. He hoped Sarah had found peace. Their story was a closed chapter, but its lessons were etched on his soul. Rex circled back, dropping a stick at his feet, tail wagging. Marcus laughed, throwing it into the field. The Malinois bounded after it, a joyful blur against the green grass. This was a legacy, not in statues or citations, but in the daily work, in a child's trust, in the simple joy of a retrieved stick, in knowing they had made a difference, reminding a city of the power of selfless courage. Rex returned with the stick, panting enthusiastically. Marcus knelt, wrapping his arms around the dog's powerful neck, burying his face in the familiar fur. "Good boy, Rex," he whispered, his voice thick with pride, gratitude, and a love that transcended species. "You're the best partner a man could ever have." The dog leaned into the hug, his tail sweeping the grass in a wide, happy arc. He didn't need a ceremony. His handler's approval, the joy of the chase, the safety of his pack, this was everything. As the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the sky in orange and purple, man and dog turned for home. They walked side by side, their silhouettes merging into one. The city below glittered, a vast organism of light and shadow, of joy and sorrow, of visible paths and hidden dangers. But for Marcus and Rex, the path was clear. They would walk it together, as always, one step at a time, a handler and his dog, partners in a world they were committed to protecting. Their story was a legend, but for them, it was just a prelude to the next chapter, the next patrol, the next silent communication that passed between them in a glance. They were a team, and as long as they had each other, they were ready. The legacy wasn't just in the past. It was in every present moment they stood together. It was in the quiet understanding that some threats are too subtle for machines, some protections too profound for words. It was in the unwavering truth that in a world of complexity, the pure instinct of a loyal heart could be the most powerful force of all. The seasons turned, and the sharp edges of the Grand Central event began to soften into the polished sheen of city lore. For Marcus and Rex, life settled into a new, steady rhythm, one punctuated not by frantic alerts, but by the deep, quiet satisfaction of partnership that had been tested in fire and found unbreakable. The unit's funding was secure, their methods were now textbook, and public admiration was a constant, low hum in the background of their duties. But inside the kennel, at the end of a long shift, it was just a man and his dog. One evening, Marcus sat at his desk, finishing the last of his paperwork. Rex lay at his feet, chin on his paws, eyes closed. On the desk, next to a stack of forms, was a folded, slightly crumpled note from Chloe. He looked at it, then down at Rex. The dog's chest rose and fell in a steady, peaceful rhythm. In these quiet moments, the noise of the world faded away, and the true magnitude of what they had accomplished, what Rex had accomplished, settled over him with profound, humbling weight. It wasn't about the takedowns or the headlines. It was about a single, silent decision made in a split second by a creature of instinct. It was about a circle formed not of aggression, but of protection. Rex had looked at a small, frightened child and had seen only someone who needed to be kept safe. In doing so, he hadn't just solved a case. He reaffirmed a fundamental truth about decency and courage. The new training protocols, born from their experience, were producing remarkable results. Other K-9 teams were now demonstrating a sharper, more intuitive understanding of anomalous threats. The Thorne-Rex protocol, as it was officially dubbed, was saving lives in other cities, at other terminals, in situations no one could have predicted. Their legacy was not a static statue in an atrium. It was a living, evolving practice, a new language between handlers and their dogs that was making the entire country safer. A few days later, a formal report landed on Marcus's desk. It was a final, closed summary from the federal authorities on the Parker case. The two operatives had accepted plea deals, providing enough information to severely cripple Aegis Solutions' operations. The network was dismantled. The case was, for all intents and purposes, over. As Marcus read the final line, the immediate threat to the subjects has been neutralized. He felt a chapter of his life click firmly, irrevocably shut. He took Rex for a long walk that evening, not on patrol, but just a walk. They moved through familiar streets, the city lights beginning to glitter against the twilight sky. Rex trotted ahead, his leash slack, his posture easy. He would occasionally look back, checking in, his dark eyes meeting Marcus's with a trust that was as solid as the ground beneath their feet. They ended up at a quiet overlook. The sprawling panorama of New York laid out before them. Marcus sat on a bench, and Rex settled beside him, his head resting on Marcus's knee. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the city breathe. Marcus thought about the hidden currents that flowed beneath the surface of everyday life, the plots, the dangers, the invisible wires. But he also thought about the countercurrents, the loyalty, the instinct, the unwavering will to protect. He looked at Rex, who was now watching the lights with a calm, thoughtful expression. "It's a big world, isn't it, boy?" Marcus murmured, stroking the dog's head. Rex sighed, a contented puff of air, and leaned harder against his leg. A week later, a small, unmarked package arrived from Marcus at the precinct. Inside, with no return address, was a framed photograph. It showed a little girl with bright sapphire blue eyes, smiling widely, a gap where her first tooth had been. She was holding a drawing of a police dog with a yellow crayon. Standing beside her, a hand on her shoulder, was her mother, her face peaceful and smiling. On the back, in a familiar, elegant script, were 2 words: "Thank you." Marcus hung the picture on the wall of the common room, next to the letter from a father in Queens. It was a quiet gallery of their impact, a reminder that their work reached further than any crime statistic could measure. That night, as Marcus prepared to leave, Rex stood by the door, his leash in his mouth, tail wagging. He was ready for home, for dinner, for the simple comfort of his bed. The great protector was, for now, just a dog. "All right, partner, let's go," Marcus said, clipping the leash. As they walked out into the cool night air, their shadows stretching long under the streetlights, Marcus felt a sense of completion. The story that had begun in chaos and fear had found its resolution in quiet purpose. The danger was past. The legacy was secure. The bond was forged for life. They turned the corner, man and dog, their steps in sync, moving forward together into the rest of their lives, a single, unbreakable unit against whatever the world might bring next. The Guardians were still on duty, but for tonight, their watch was over. It was time to go home. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Bonds Unspoken. Every click helps us share more incredible moments that celebrate the bond between humans and animals. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds us what true loyalty feels like.